Good morning and welcome to Recipe for Success. My name is Nancy Giacalone, and the point of this live series is to blend two things that I love. I love business and marketing and cooking. And so my love for cooking prompted me to think about how it works in the business environment as well, because in cooking, there's always one really key ingredient or technique that is critical to the success of whatever you're trying to make. And really, that's very true in business as well. So it's been really fun to talk to business leaders and entrepreneurs and find out a little bit about more what their recipe for success is. So today, I'm thrilled to have Brian Harding on my show. He is the founder of Creating a Success Path for the Service Industry. Welcome, Brian, and introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I'm Brian Harding, as you mentioned. I have a couple of things I'm related to. I'm kind of going through a rebranding thing that we'll get into in a little bit. So I have a product or a course called Service Industry Success. I have another one called My Success Works, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. But they are for people in service industries like contractors, auto repair shops, home service companies, IT, and other professional services. I work with folks like that. I had a business that I just sold a couple of businesses earlier this year on January 1st. Those closed. And that's where you and I met, of course. Myself and my two partners started a business in 2011. And, my living room was global headquarters, started really small, just the three of us. And 9 years later, we had over 50 employees and we're invoicing 9,000 jobs a year. And we had really tremendous growth. And so I've sold my shares of that company. And now I'm doing work with people one-on-one and in a group coaching kind of setting now.
Well, you mentioned it, but that is how I actually first met you, is when you were the co-owner of your former business. And honestly, I was so impressed. I have been in my industry for a very long time, as most people know. And I went to one of your employee meetings to do an annual open enrollment. And I heard and saw and felt the culture that you had created in that business. And it kind of blew me away. So how were you able to create that kind of culture in a service industry? Because I don't see it very often. And how do you think that those skills that you built are going to translate to your current clients?
Well, they first of all, thank you. It's nice to have that kind of effort recognized and see the fruition of what you're trying to build and those kind of things. Building a culture is for me, it's a deliberate thing. And I think that most people kind of assume if you're just a nice person, it just happens. And I don't think that's factually how it works, right? And so one of the things I teach people I work with now is, especially, and I have kind of the business ownership journey is broken into 5 stages. What I teach is there's 5 stages. Stage 3, which is the hardest one where most businesses fail, is where the business owner is transitioning from being an employee to a business owner, right? So 2 things are happening there simultaneously. The business owner wants freedom, but they're reluctant to give up control. And those kind of forces fighting against each other is what creates all the friction. One of the things you have to learn to do in that stage is delegate decisions and authority to employees. Some of those things you delegate need to be like doing the right thing when nobody's looking, right? And wanting to do the right thing and wanting to be successful for the team. And those are things you have to deliberately plan, I think. The good news is they can be taught. They're all things, if I can do it, anybody else can do it, right? So I think that that's all important people to understand, is it has to be deliberate action, but it can be done. And ultimately for me, the baseline question for all the things having to do with creating a good culture come down to asking this one question in virtually every setting. What's in it for the employee, right? So, and I don't mean that like in a rhetorical sense. I mean, like in a grand scheme, what's in it for the employee to work for you versus brand X? Like, you both offer a paycheck, you both offer benefits, or whatever your industry's equivalent is. What's in it for them to work for you? Like, sort that out. I think that's a really key thing. Another example would be I worked with somebody, and several months ago they were having a problem where they would have people in leadership roles who would go out to job sites and would just not be prepared. And they would call the business owner at 9 o'clock in the morning every day and say, hey, I forgot this, or this isn't ready, or whatever. And the business owner was very frustrated and said, I don't know how to get these people on board with proactively doing the right thing, and being prepared. And I said, well, so let me get this straight. They're not prepared. They go to the job site, they call you, you're frustrated, you vent for 90 seconds, and then you solve the problem, right? Yeah. What's in it for them to do anything different? Like, why would they stop doing that? They have to endure 90 seconds of your frustration and you take all the responsibility. Why would they not do that anymore, right? So again, the baseline question for me in most of these things that relate to culture and getting employees on board with things is asking all the time, what's in it for the employee to do this?
Well, you make a really good point, because I will raise my hand and say I have been guilty of doing just that exact thing, where it's like, okay, I'll just get it done instead of flipping it around. So really excellent point. One of the things I also remember about that meeting was, I remember this is a service industry business, so most of these people are blue collar male workers, and I remember them freely standing up and sharing something good they had seen another coworker doing, complimenting another coworker. And that was, that just spoke to me. And that's clearly something that you created and fostered to make them comfortable doing that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the meeting you were at was a weekly meeting where we talked about company initiatives, safety, annual harassment policy, problems we had the previous week. It's just a weekly meeting where we like everybody got together and we just kind of State of the Union kind of a thing, right? Part of that process was diagnosing problems we had the previous week. So if we had a warranty issue, if we had an accident, if we had any of those kinds of things that we don't want to have, we had to kind of get into those and figure out what's the root cause for this. How do we prevent this from happening again? What is it in our processes that we need to fix? Yada, 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 right? Without the counterbalance of what did we do that was awesome, that could turn pretty negative pretty quickly, right? Just left on its own, that would just spiral into a negative, and pretty soon the same people are getting pointed at all the time, and they're the ones that cause this. And so it just felt like we had to have the counterbalance for that, which was, what are we doing really well? And for us, answering the question, what's in it for our employees to work here? One of the baseline things for us in that company was our employees really helped each other a lot, like way more than I've ever seen in any other company like that. For example, if a person was, in Everett on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock and they needed a tool, there would be people who lived in let's say Spanaway, who were in the Puyallup area, who would just drive to Everett and drop it off for them and help them out. And there was no manager that asked them to do that, no supervisor that told them they had to. That was one of the things that's what's in it for the employees to work for is we have a group of people who are very supportive of each other. It's a very much a team environment, even though you're working on your own. So not highlighting that seemed like a disservice to the people who were doing these awesome things. And the meeting would have gotten really negative if we had not deliberately, created this positive thing. So the answer was self-evident. What did we do that didn't work last week? Okay, let's get through that and solve the problem. And then what did we do that was really cool last week? And let's end the meeting with that.
I love that. That's just amazing. Okay, so we're going to switch hats for a second and go back to your coaching, which is what you're doing now. And no disrespect to anybody, because there's some amazing ones out there, but it seems like everyone's a business coach these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coach. There's LinkedIn coaches, there's business coaches, there's whatever. So what made you decide to jump into that crowded field, and what do you think sets you apart?
So it's interesting how this all came about. So again, my company that I had, we had pretty tremendous growth. We averaged about 38% growth every year for 9 years. And so it wasn't very long, 4 or 5 years in, until people started, instead of me asking people, how did you solve this problem? Or how do you fix this? Or whatever, they started asking me, hey, can you go to lunch? I got something I want to run by you, or could you help me solve this problem? And I did not have any interest at that point in being a quote unquote coach. But I enjoy helping people. We got a lot of help from people. I was very happy to kind of pay that forward. I'm not really a fan of cliches, but that's kind of what we were doing is hey, people help me out. I'm certainly going to help other folks out. And then those lunches and things kind of turned into more of a, hey, can I call you again in a couple of weeks and follow up? So I really started seeing people would come back and report, hey, you told me to do this, or you gave me this advice. I went and implemented it, and I came back and it worked. Hey, thanks a lot. Now how about this thing? And we kind of be on to the next topic. And I really enjoyed doing that. And my business had gotten to the point where I was working a few days a week. My favorite part of my job was mentoring the managers who were going to run the company someday. But then there was this one thing that happened about 2 years ago that really just propelled me forward in this. And I was at a networking meeting, and there was a person there who's a business coach, and they had a product that they were selling, which was kind of a lead magnet, I guess you would call it, right? And the thing that they were selling was just wrong. It was factually incorrect, and it pissed me off. It made me so angry because I remember being vulnerable, and I remember times where I would have written a check for $10,000 for somebody to help me just to have the feeling that somebody was going to help me, let alone if they actually solve the problem or not. And it really made me angry that a person was not even aware that they were selling something that was just factually wrong. And so I kind of went through my Rolodex in my head. And I'm like, how could it? Well, before I did that, I asked myself, how could this be? And the answer was, this person never owned a business before. They had gone to school and got a business degree or whatever. And then I started kind of going through my Rolodex in my head and like, who are the business coaches I know? And I knew about 12 at the time. And the next question was, how many of those have ever owned their own business? And the answer was one. One out of the 12 I knew had ever owned a business. And that really made me angry. For a bunch of reasons, mostly though, because I felt that people in these situations where they're trying to make payroll, they got more stress than they can take on. If you catch them at the right moment, they're extremely vulnerable and they have access to a large amount of money in a checking account. It just made me angry. And so I said, you know what, rather than complaining about it, I'm just going to start helping people. And then like most things in life, I wasn't really confident that I could really help people. And even though I'd been working with folks for a while, and then there was this kind of moment where I knew I was on the right track. I was working with somebody who'd been in business for 30 years, and I was just questioning myself, like, what could I possibly teach this person, right? And it turns out this person's like my biggest fan. Like they, the way that they explain how the shift that's happened in their business by teaching the things I teach with our stuff, the stages and identifying the right problem and problem solving correctly and building that culture. Once I knew I could help that person, then I was like, I know I'm on the right track. I love what I do. My favorite part of my quote unquote regular job was mentoring the future leaders. This gives me a chance to do what I like and I love. And it's just been awesome. And again, I keep going back to, there's a ton of business coaches. There's not a ton of business coaches who own a business, and it's bewildering to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that you actually speak to something that's close to my heart, because one of the things that is very important to me, and one of my focuses for the next 5 to 7 years, is to create a legacy in this industry, because we don't in my industry, we don't have really good training opportunities or mentors to really bring people up adequately. So I love what you're doing. I think you're bringing a very valuable service.
One of the things that I would like explain to folks is you cannot learn how to do ballet by reading a book. You cannot learn how to play a piano by reading a book. You can't learn to play golf by reading a book. You certainly cannot learn how to run a business by reading a book.
That is a true story. I have owned my business for 25 years in April. So believe me, I have been through the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
It's true. Okay. So if you were talking to a business owner in the service industry, because I know that's kind of your primary focus right now, what's the number one piece of advice or tip that you would give them that would instantly make a difference?
Well, I'm reluctant to ever give here's the one thing.
It's not one thing, but one.
Yeah. So I think that if I had to choose anything, it would be to being deliberate, like having a plan, right? So one of the things that I've learned with working with people is we become paralyzed and overwhelmed and kind of rudderless because we don't know which direction to go oftentimes, right? And part of that is because we won't answer a handful of basic questions. One of those for people in service industries is, how big of a company am I trying to build? And if you ask 100 business owners that in the service industry, over 90 of them are going to say, I don't know. And my answer is, well, if you're building a 12-person business or a 43-person business, those are entirely different organizations with entirely different structures, entirely different cultures and feels and moods. And not declaring what you're trying to build creates this waffling that goes back and forth, and you're making emotional decisions day by day. Sometimes you're leaning towards that 12-person company, and sometimes you're leaning towards that 43. And because you're going back and forth, you're not moving forward as fast as you could. And there's a couple other, like what's in it for my employees to work for me? That answer that question, like not rhetorically, and don't give answers like I have an open door policy and we have a great culture and these kind of cliche catch-all terms that really are meaningless. There's a handful of questions. If you just answer those difficult questions, your life would be a lot easier. So I guess I would come down to being deliberate and not just kind of waffling through this process, because that waffling process costs a lot of time, money, aggravation, doubt. It creates so much challenge, too many problems. And even if you declare, I'm going to build a 20-person company, and 8 months later you change your mind and say, okay, now I'm going to build a 30-person company. Okay, it's fine. That's still way more efficient than not declaring at all. And if you change your mind 50 times over 10 years, you're still way better off than just not knowing and just kind of bumbling your way through it.
Well, a couple of things pop into my head based on that. Number one, I think, and I think this because I've experienced it over the years, is I think a lot of business owners struggle with imposter syndrome. They're not sure that they're worthy to grow their business, so they don't ever pick a number because that seems too much for them. So that's what they stay in, that kind of that unknown place. At least that's kind of my perception.
For sure.
And the other thing is, I don't think that a lot of business owners have clarity on who they are and what they want to do, not even the size. You and I were talking a little bit earlier before the show about a post I'd made the other day about the book, Building a Story Brand. And I think it's just had my mind spinning, because not only is that a great tool for defining yourself from a marketing standpoint, it's a great tool for defining yourself as a business standpoint as well.
Yeah. And you know, that, you talk about that imposter syndrome. And again, what we talk about in the coaching I do is there's 5 stages. You know, the first stage, you're just like trying to figure out what you're going to be. The second stage is all about the customer. The third stage is all about the employees. The fourth stage is all about processes. And the 5th stage is all about succession, right? So in that third stage, where the business owner is transitioning from being an employee to a business owner, they have to delegate way more things to the employees. In that stage, it really highlights that imposter syndrome. It really highlights the fears and doubts and reluctance to give up control. All those things are like a spotlight is put on those fears and things we like to hide way down deep in our mind and not even acknowledge to ourselves. And just becoming aware of those things, and like a business owner would just question, do I deserve the monetary and freedom of time and those benefits that go along with success? If I don't believe I'm worthy of those things, you're never going to get out of that stage. You're always going to feel like your business owns you, because you're subconsciously creating this moat or wall that you can't overcome because you don't feel like you're worthy of that success. And if you're not even tuned into that, I don't know how you would overcome it.
Right. I think that is spot on. The other thing that I think was interesting, going back to the Story Brand book, is one of the things I personally learned was that whenever your business should treat the customer or the client as the hero of the story and not you. Yeah. And I think that's a fundamental shift that business owners sometimes really struggle with. Is that that they see themselves as the hero. I'm going to rescue these people. No, you're going to help them rescue themselves. Yeah. And I think that's the thing we have to do with employees too.
Yeah. So for me, like, again, I talked about the few questions. If we just answer these questions, our life would be easier. In between, what kind of company am I trying to build and what's in it for the employees is what's in it for the customer to buy from me instead of brand X. And again, it can't be because we have quote unquote great customer service or these, again, meaningless terms that don't like have any value. Specifically, why should they buy from you instead of somebody else? And without starting to speak our internal industry jargon that makes us sound like the expert, and we lose sight of solving their problem. Like it becomes a commercial, like our approach to helping them becomes a commercial for adding credibility to ourselves instead of remembering that we're trying to solve their problem. And and those languages are not necessarily, they don't mesh very well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so if there's business owners or entrepreneurs out there wondering, well, how do I get this sort of clarity, direction, confidence I so desperately need to make progress? Where should they go? Who should they talk to?
Well, they can certainly talk to me. They can go
That
to
was
serviceindustrysuccess.com. Now, I will warn folks that we are in the midst of a massive rebrand. Over the next 90 days, that website's going to look completely different than it does now. The current version I did myself, so it looks like a third grader did it, right?
we all have to start somewhere.
Yeah. So, but we are in the middle of a rebrand. So if they go to serviceindustrysuccess.com, there's a place they can sign up and they can get the success path that I talk about, the service industry success path, which kind of breaks down these 5 stages. It gives milestones and action items for each stage. So it helps people, like if you're in stage 2, it tells you what to focus on now to get the most benefit. If you're in stage 4, same thing. And it gives that kind of clarity. They can certainly email me as well if they have a specific challenge they're trying to work through, brian@successful-concepts.com. There's a Facebook group, there's a LinkedIn page, Service Industry Success. If they look for that in any platform, they're going to find it. There's a podcast that'll be coming out in the next few weeks called Service Industry Success. That's going to be a short 20-minute, here's a problem you're facing, here's a solution kind of format. It'd be weekly. That's something they could tune into as well. But if they just find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, I'm out there. If they just find me, there's pretty clear paths of where they can get the information that'd be helpful for them.
Awesome. Well, I will, after the show is over with, I will put links to all of those resources in the comments. So anybody that is interested can connect with you. So we are on to my 5 burning questions that I have for every guest. Number 1 is always, what is your favorite food in the whole world, and can you cook it?
Man, I tell you, as you can tell by looking at me, I have a lot of favorite foods. But if I had to choose one, I would probably just say a good ribeye steak would probably always just it's simple, it's flavorful. I mean, it's tough to pick between Mexican food and Italian food. I love all those things. But if I had to say, like, what's your number one, like, go-to, a really well grilled ribeye steak would be it. And yeah, I used to be really handy at cooking. My wife loves to cook those, so I don't get much practice anymore. But we're fortunate that we get to have that at least once a week probably, and it's always awesome.
Awesome. I just realized that I had completely skipped over a question, and I'm going to actually circle back to it because I think it was an important thing I definitely wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So, at the same time that you decided to leave your former company and go out on your own, from the coaching standpoint, you also decided to make a physical move.
Yeah.
Not across town, but to an entirely different state.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, what prompted that move?
So we sold our family size house and we bought a much smaller place in Washington. So we still have a footprint there, and we bought a house in Arizona. So we're still technically Washington state residents. I still vote in Washington, all that kind of stuff. We are transitioning over the next couple of years for sure. And it's a bunch of things. I'm in the point in my life where I enjoy doing things outdoors. And after traveling for the last 5 or 10 years, as much as we have, which is, a fair amount, you go to the Caribbean and you get used to that sun, and then you go back home and it rains for 7 months, and it's different than when you're young and you don't have the means to do anything, right? So that weather is certainly a factor. But I would have to say one of the biggest factors is just the political climate in Washington. I can do what I do from anywhere as long as I have an internet connection and a phone line. You can see that this is my webinar / classroom studio. I have one here in Arizona, and I have a one that looks exactly the same in Puyallup. So I can do this from anywhere. But the political climate just was not fun. You look at the last 3 times my wife and I went to Seattle to go to the theater or something like that, we were literally less than 2 blocks away from drive-by shootings. It's not fun to go there anymore. And it doesn't appear that it's like moving in it. There's no end in sight. Like we're just barreling down this path of that, what, again, when I talk to legislators about this, and I go to Olympia, which I'm very active in things in Olympia, I would say to legislators, like, the questions business owners have to ask are, what's in it for the customer? What's in it for the employee? You should be asking what's in it with the business owner to be in Washington State. And that is just like a thought that just appears to be not even recognized. And so as things were happening in Seattle, where we have 40-something vehicles driving around, I was like, well, if a mob of people surrounds that truck and the driver panics and runs somebody over, who's going to get sued for that? The business owner. If that mob of people surrounds that truck and the driver doesn't panic, but the driver gets hurt, who's going to get sued for that? The business owner. So the risk reward thing just didn't feel good. And politics, weather, and traffic are probably the top 3 reasons we moved somewhere else.
Well, you can't pick much 3 better reasons. So I would imagine, though, being in Arizona in the sunshine, there's a lot more opportunities for grilling those ribeyes too, right?
We actually have it's a bizarre thing out here. There's actually like an outdoor built-in grill, like it's built into the landscaping. It's awesome.
I love it. Okay, so back to the coaching again. I'm sorry, I'm flip-flopping a little bit. But how are you currently marketing your program? And have you found that there's one method that seems to be better than others?
So we are, like I said, we're in the middle of a rebrand. I hired a StoryBrand certified marketing agency who is fluent in the platform I use to host my membership courses and things like that. So it's not just a matter of finding somebody who can build a website. There's a specific platform I use to host video courses and Kajabi, yeah. Yeah, so I had to find somebody who was both fluent in and a certified StoryBrand marketing person who could also do Kajabi. And that took a little bit of work. I found somebody who I think they're really awesome. And so we literally had our kickoff meeting 2 days ago. We're in the very infancy of that. But it's about a 90-day process, and we'll come out of that with a Kajabi site that has an awesome looking page for people to come find out what we do. And I'm also on the other end for people who are existing clients and members. Their experience will be a lot better. We'll have clarity on who we're trying to reach if we ever decide to do Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever. I've purchased a handful of URLs that I think will be helpful, like how to read a P&L. I couldn't believe that was available. I thought that was
you're kidding me. It was available?
Yeah. So there was about a dozen or so of those that I bought that will someday, not all at once, but someday over the next 3 years will be useful for marketing. And to be honest, this year I'm doing some testing. I'm gonna test a few different website strategies. I'm gonna test some stuff with Facebook. And I'll know a lot more in a year than I know today for sure. But the foundation of it is going to be that StoryBrand thing. That really resonated with me a lot. It really gels with what I teach already. So it just kind of felt like a natural fit. And I really, my favorite part of doing this is helping people, like getting through those frustrating, icky parts of being a business owner. My whole thrill is helping people get through those quickly, not laboring in those and being stuck in those spots, right?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to check back with you in a year and find out what the most successful techniques and platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be glad to share that.
Okay, so we talked about it from a service industry, but if you could magically get employers to do one thing, business owners to do one thing to improve their business, what would it be? Yeah,
again, I think it would be that clarity and being deliberate. A close second, communication. I mean, just as in life, we all struggle, I think, with communication. You can look at anything, anywhere, and find companies struggling with that. Whether you buy something online and they have very rigid processes for you to go through, and then you click the purchase button, and they may not even have a confirmation that your order was done. I did that with Logitech the other day. I bought a new webcam, and I clicked the purchase button, and I was in limbo for like 18 hours wondering if that order actually went through. Like, just basic communication like that. And certainly with employees, I think people assume that people know and understand things all the time that people don't know and understand. That creates a massive amount of confusion. So I could go on and on about that.
Okay, so here we go. What is your secret talent or something people would be surprised to know about you?
Well, the thing that people are definitely surprised to find out about me is I am a damn good dancer.
Ooh, I am surprised to learn that.
Yeah, so I did like in high school, I did ballroom dancing. It was a great place to meet girls.
I
You
bet.
know,
I
there
bet.
weren't a lot of guys doing it. I've actually helped people learn to learn dancing for their weddings and stuff like that. So I don't do a lot of it anymore, but people are definitely surprised to find that out.
That is awesome. Okay, so last question. Who's the one person that you've connected with or follow on LinkedIn or alternatively a podcast host that you would most like to meet in real person? Sit down, share a cup of coffee, and, debrief.
This person is not on LinkedIn, I don't think. They're definitely on Facebook, and they have a podcast I listen to. I would say Adam Carolla.
I love
He's
Adam Carolla.
he's like me. I think he's a balance of serious and let's get the job done, but let's have fun along the way and let's not take ourselves so seriously. I kind of get that vibe from Elon Musk. Also, I kind of get that vibe from Gary Vaynerchuk. I just like people who are listen. Yes, we need to work hard and get things done, but life is short. Also, let's have some fun along the way. So I think anyone who's equal parts those two things I'm gonna gravitate towards.
Yeah, well, I think having sharing a meal or a beer or something with Adam Carolla would be amazing. I think he's hilarious on top of everything else, which I can
Yeah,
always appreciate. So,
yeah.
okay, well, that is it for today. I really want to thank you for coming on. I think you shared some really valuable tips with everyone. Again,
Thanks.
I will put all those links in the comments, so anybody that would like to learn more, please follow Brian on LinkedIn here and check out his links. If you're still struggling figuring out how to get a hold of him, please reach out to me and I will be happy to make that connection. So,
Yeah.
is there any parting words you want to share with anybody?
Yeah, there actually is. For anybody who has not become a client of yours yet, who's looking for health benefits, I tell you, having experienced what it's like to be the customer for dozens, if not hundreds of companies over the years, no question, you guys are right at the top as far as customer service, follow through, communication, diligence. Anybody who's not like really jump ship and become a client of yours is costing themselves frustration they don't need to. You guys are awesome what you do. And I know that this kind of platform is not really easy for you to brag about yourself, but you should be bragging about yourself. You guys are one of the best things that ever happened to us was getting a referral to meet you guys and switching our benefits provider to Olympic Crest. You guys are just awesome. And I appreciate that. And I hope people know that you're really good at what you do.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to more opportunities to work together in the future and have a fantastic day.
You do the same, Nancy. Take care.